The morning sun was just beginning to warm the dew-covered grass when Raj spotted her sitting alone on the park bench. He had been following his usual jogging route, the same path he'd taken every morning for the past 3 years, when something made him slow his pace. Maybe it was the way she was hunched over, or how tightly she was gripping her phone. Whatever it was, something didn't feel right. Raj wasn't the type to interfere in strangers' business. At 32, his life revolved around his work as a software developer, his small circle of friends, and his peaceful morning routines. He'd learned long ago that keeping to himself was the safest way to live in the city, but today was different. As he got closer, he could hear soft sniffling sounds. The girl, she couldn't have been more than 25, was trying hard to hide her tears, quickly wiping them away with the sleeve of her light blue sweater. Her long dark hair fell forward, creating a curtain between her face and the world. "Excuse me," Raj heard himself say, surprising even himself. "Are you okay?" She looked up, startled. Her eyes were red-rimmed but clear, and something about them made Raj's chest tighten with concern. She had a kind face, the sort you'd trust instantly, like your favorite elementary school teacher or a friendly neighborhood aunt. I'm fine," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Just having a rough morning." She tried to smile, but her lips quivered. Raj shifted uncomfortably on his feet. His morning run was already off schedule, and he had a team meeting at 9. But something kept him rooted to the spot. "Sometimes talking to a stranger helps," he offered, maintaining a respectful distance. "No pressure, though." The girl, who introduced herself as Priya, seemed to consider this for a moment. Then, as if a dam had broken, words began pouring out. Her grandmother was in the hospital, she explained. She'd rushed out so quickly this morning after getting the call that she'd forgotten her wallet. Now she was stranded, with no way to get across town to the hospital. "I tried calling my friends, but everyone's at work," she said, gesturing helplessly with her phone. "And the taxi apps won't work without my cards." Raj found himself nodding along. He knew exactly which hospital she was talking about. It was near his office. The story made perfect sense. After all, who hasn't had that moment of panic when you realize you've left your wallet behind? Looking at his watch, Raj made a quick calculation. His team meeting wasn't that important, and helping someone in need felt like the right thing to do. Besides, the hospital was on his way to work. "I could give you a ride," he heard himself say. "If you're comfortable with that, of course. The hospital's on my way to work." Priya's face lit up with such genuine relief that any doubts Raj had disappeared instantly. "Really? Oh my God, thank you so much. You have no idea what this means to me." As they walked toward his car in the parking lot, Raj felt good about his decision. His mother always said that good deeds come back to you tenfold, and helping someone visit their sick grandmother had to count as a good deed, right? What Raj didn't notice was how Priya's fingers flew across her phone keyboard as they walked, or how her eyes darted around the parking lot, or the way her other hand kept checking something in her pocket. He was too busy feeling good about helping someone in need to notice these tiny warning signs that would soon turn his ordinary morning into something far more extraordinary. Little did he know, this simple act of kindness was about to change his life in ways he never could have imagined. The drive started normally enough. Raj's blue sedan pulled smoothly out of the park's parking lot, with Priya giving directions from the passenger seat. The morning traffic was light, and the autumn breeze drifted in through the half-open windows, carrying the scent of someone's freshly cut grass. "Turn left at the next signal," Priya said softly, her eyes fixed on her phone. "Then we'll take the highway." Her voice had a slight tremor that Raj hadn't noticed before. He assumed it was worry about her grandmother, but something felt off about the route she was suggesting. "The highway?" Raj frowned slightly, keeping his eyes on the road. "I know a shorter way to City Hospital. We could take Park Street and be there in 15 minutes. Living in the city for 8 years had taught him all the shortcuts. Praya's response came a bit too quickly. Oh, but there's construction on Park Street. My friend just texted me about it. The highway would be better. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous gesture that didn't quite match her confident tone. The morning sun caught something metallic in her purse when she moved to check her phone again. Probably just keys, Raj thought, but a tiny voice in his head whispered that something wasn't adding up. He'd driven past Park Street yesterday. There hadn't been any construction. Still, he nodded and followed her directions. The car radio played soft music in the background, some popular song about love and trust. How ironic, looking back on it now. So, tell me about your grandmother, Raj said, trying to make conversation and maybe quiet the growing unease in his stomach. Which ward is she in? Oh, Praya's fingers paused over her phone. The cardiac ward. She had a heart problem this morning. She was looking out the window now, avoiding eye contact. The hospital had just built a new cardiac wing. Everyone in the city knew about it. It would have been the perfect detail to add to make her story more believable. But Raj remembered something else. The new cardiac wing wasn't even open yet. It wouldn't be accepting patients for another month. His hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. The highway entrance was coming up ahead, but instead of the usual morning traffic, it looked strangely empty. Just a couple of parked cars near the entrance, one of them a black SUV that seemed out of place. Praya's phone buzzed again. This time, Raj caught a glimpse of the message preview. Ready in position. His heart started beating faster, but he kept his face neutral. Years of playing poker with his friends finally came in handy. He pretended to adjust the air conditioning, using the movement to check his own phone in his pocket. Yes, it was still there, and yes, he could reach the emergency button his brother had insisted he install in his car last month. Could you turn up the AC? Priya asked, her voice different now. Harder. And pull over near that black SUV. We need to make a quick stop. Raj saw two men getting out of the SUV in his rearview mirror. They were walking casually, but something about their stance made his blood run cold. One of them had his hand inside his jacket, and they were spreading out, approaching from different angles. In that moment, Raj realized three things. First, there was no sick grandmother. Second, he was about to become another statistic in the city's rising carjacking cases. And third, he had about 10 seconds to decide what to do next. The story about the grandmother, the forgotten wallet, the tears in the park, it had all been an act. A carefully crafted performance designed to prey on the kindness of strangers. But what Priya and her accomplices didn't know was that Raj wasn't just any stranger, and this wasn't going to play out the way they expected. Time seemed to slow down as Raj's mind raced through his options. The black SUV loomed ahead, and those two men were getting closer with each step. His fingers moved slowly toward the emergency button hidden under his steering wheel, installed during a time when he thought he was being overly cautious. Now that caution might save his life. Priya's whole demeanor had changed. Gone was the vulnerable girl from the park bench. Her voice turned sharp as steel when she spoke again. Just do exactly what we tell you, and this will be quick and simple. She reached into her purse, and Raj's worst fears were confirmed when he glimpsed something that definitely wasn't the house key. But Raj had an advantage they didn't know about. Growing up, his father always told him to stay calm in tough situations. Your brain works better when you're not panicking, he'd say. Right now, those words echoed in his head as he noticed several things at once. First, there was a traffic camera at the highway entrance, the same one that had caught him speeding last month. Second, a delivery truck was approaching from the opposite direction. And third, his car's safety system would lock all doors automatically if he pressed the brake hard enough. Pull over here, Priya commanded, gesturing toward the SUV. The two men were about 30 feet away now, trying to look casual, but failing miserably. One was wearing a cap pulled low over his eyes, while the other kept scanning the road nervously. Raj pretended to comply, slowly easing his foot off the gas. Okay, okay. I'm pulling over, he said, making his voice shake just enough to sound frightened. Let them think he was just another scared victim. Meanwhile, his finger found the tiny panic button under the steering wheel. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion, like a scene from those action movies Raj usually found too unrealistic. But this was very real, and he was living it. Just as the car began to slow, Raj did three things in quick succession. He slammed the brake hard, triggering the automatic door locks with a loud click that made Priya jump. In the same motion, he pressed the panic button, sending his location to both the police and his brother, who worked at the nearby police station. And finally, he swerved toward the approaching delivery truck, forcing it to blast its horn and stop suddenly. The commotion attracted the attention of other drivers who were just starting to appear on the morning commute. Priya's accomplices, not wanting to draw attention, quickly backed away from the car. The element of surprise, their biggest advantage, was gone. What are you doing? Priya hissed, her composed facade cracking as she realized things were spiraling out of control. She reached for the door handle, but the child lock system Raj had activated when he first grew suspicious kept her trapped inside. The sound of distant sirens filled the air. Raj's brother must have acted on the emergency signal immediately. The two men near the SUV heard it too. They exchanged panicked looks before rushing back to their vehicle, leaving Priya behind. Some friends you've got there, Raj said quietly, watching in his rearview mirror as the black SUV peeled away. They didn't even try to help you. Priya's face went through a series of emotions: anger, fear, and finally, defeat. She slumped back in her seat, knowing she was caught. The phone in her hand buzzed one last time before she let it fall into her lap. As the sirens grew louder, Raj took a deep breath. His hands were shaking now that the immediate danger had passed, but a strange sense of calm washed over him. He just outsmarted a group of criminals who had probably done this dozens of times before. But this time, they'd picked the wrong target. The morning sun was fully up now, transforming the scene into something almost ordinary, except for the police cars racing toward them, lights flashing. But this story was far from over, and what the police would discover next would shock everyone. 3 police cars surrounded Raj's sedan within minutes, their red and blue lights painting the morning scene like a surreal light show. His brother Arun jumped out of the first car, his police uniform slightly wrinkled, as if he'd thrown it on in a hurry. The look of relief on his face when he saw Raj was okay quickly turned to determination as he approached the passenger side. Never thought your paranoid big brother's safety suggestions would come in handy, did you? Arun said with a slight smile, though his eyes remained serious. Other officers moved in to take control of the situation, and Priya was carefully removed from the car. As she was being led to a police vehicle, something fell from her pocket, a small notebook. It hit the ground and split open, revealing pages filled with dates, names, and locations. One of the younger officers picked it up, his eyes widening as he flipped through it. "Sir, you need to see this," he called to the senior inspector who had just arrived. The inspector adjusted his glasses and began reading, his expression growing grimmer with each page. Meanwhile, Raj stood by his car, giving his statement to another officer. His hands had finally stopped shaking, and he could think clearly again. The phone, he suddenly remembered. She was texting someone throughout the drive. It might have important information. They found Priya's phone on the floor of his car. The screen was still unlocked. In her panic, she hadn't thought to secure it. What they discovered made everyone's jaw drop. A complete network of similar scams, all documented in detailed messages and notes. "Look at this," Arun said, scrolling through the messages. "They've been doing this for months. Different parks, different stories, but always targeting people who look kind enough to help." His voice carried a mix of disgust and sadness. They called it harvesting kindness in their messages. The inspector gathered everyone around as more details emerged. The notebook and phone revealed a sophisticated operation. They had a whole script worked out. A young woman in distress, a sick relative, a forgotten wallet. They even had backup stories ready if someone asked too many questions. They've hit at least 30 people in the last 3 months, the inspector explained, his weathered face showing concern. Most victims were too embarrassed to report it, thinking they should have known better than to help a stranger. Raj felt a chill despite the warming morning air. How many good people had been punished for their kindness? How many had stopped helping others because of experiences like this? The phone kept buzzing with incoming messages. Prize accomplices were trying to find out what went wrong. The police tech expert quickly hooked up a device to trace the signals, hoping to catch the rest of the gang. You know what the saddest part is? Arun said quietly to Raj as they watched the investigation unfold. This whole thing works because people are basically good. They want to help. These criminals don't just steal cars, they steal people's trust. A crowd had gathered at a safe distance, held back by police tape. Raj could see them filming with their phones, and he knew this would be all over social media soon. But maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. People needed to know about scams like this, but they also needed to know that sometimes the good guys win. As if reading his thoughts, the inspector approached Raj with a serious expression. We've been trying to catch this gang for months. Your quick thinking didn't just save you. It might help us shut down their whole operation. He paused, checking his notes. But there's something else that doesn't add up. We found some documents in her phone that suggest this goes way deeper than just carjacking. Raj noticed his brother tense up at these words. Something in the inspector's tone suggested they were just scratching the surface of a much bigger story. The morning sun now hung fully in the sky, and Raj could see his office building in the distance. He definitely wasn't making it to that team meeting, but somehow that didn't seem important anymore. The inspector's phone rang, and his expression changed as he listened to the caller. Whatever he was hearing, it was big. Really big. And somehow, Raj knew his ordinary morning jog had led him straight into the middle of something extraordinary. The police station buzzed with unusual energy as Raj sat in his brother's office, sipping the terrible coffee that cops seemed to love. The events of the morning felt almost dreamlike now, but the constant movement of officers and the serious faces around him kept reminding him it was all very real. You're not going to believe this, Arun said, walking in with a stack of papers and a fresh cup of that awful coffee. Remember that phone we found? It's connected to 3 different missing persons cases. He sat down heavily in his chair, looking both excited and troubled. The tech team had been working nonstop, digging through the phone's contents. Each discovery painted a bigger, more disturbing picture. What had seemed like a simple carjacking ring was unraveling into something far more complex. Look at this. Arun spread out some documents on his desk. They weren't just stealing cars. They were using them to transport stolen goods across state lines. The sick grandmother story. They had dozens of different versions, all crafted to target specific types of people. A gentle knock on the door interrupted them. The senior inspector entered, looking like he'd aged 5 years in the past few hours. Behind him was a woman in a crisp suit who introduced herself as Officer Mira from the Criminal Investigation Department. Your morning jog may have helped us crack one of the biggest organized crime cases this year, she said, sitting down across from Raj. We've been tracking this group for months, but they were always one step ahead. Until today. The inspector pulled up a map on the computer screen. Red dots appeared all over the city, spreading out into neighboring states. Each dot represented a reported incident, someone who'd fallen for their tricks. But what caught everyone's attention were the blue lines connecting certain dots, forming a clear pattern. They were hiding in plain sight, Officer Mira explained, using people's kindness as a smokescreen for a much larger operation. The cars they stole weren't just random targets. They were carefully chosen based on their cargo capacity and ability to blend in. Raj listened, feeling a mix of shock and relief. His decision to install that emergency button, which had seemed almost silly at the time, had helped uncover all this. On the desk, his phone buzzed with messages from work, but they seemed trivial now. The best disguise is one that plays on human nature, the inspector added, rubbing his tired eyes. Who would suspect a young woman worried about her grandmother? It's brilliant in its simplicity. Just then, another officer burst into the room, slightly out of breath. "Sir, we've got movement. The SUV from this morning just showed up on traffic cameras near the old warehouse district." The room erupted into action. Officers grabbed their gear, radios crackled with coordinates, and Raj could feel the surge of energy as a plan came together. His brother stood up, checking his service weapon. "Stay here," Arun told Raj firmly. "You've done more than enough already. Let us handle the rest." But Officer Mira had a different idea. "Actually," she said thoughtfully, "we might need your help one more time." "Not for anything dangerous," she added quickly, seeing Arun's concerned face. "But your experience this morning gives you insights we could use." She laid out a plan that was both simple and clever. The gang didn't know their scheme had been exposed. They didn't realize how much information Priya's phone had revealed. And most importantly, they didn't know that the police now understood their entire operation. Sometimes, Officer Mira said with a slight smile, the best way to catch someone is to let them think they're still in control. Raj looked at the map again, at all those red dots representing people who'd been victimized. He thought about how close he'd come to being just another dot on that map. Then he thought about all the potential victims it could save by stopping this gang. "What do you need me to do?" he asked, meeting Officer Mira's determined gaze. The inspector's phone buzzed again with updates from the surveillance team. Time was critical now. What happened next would depend on perfect timing, careful planning, and just a bit more of the quick thinking that had saved Raj earlier that morning. The pieces were in place, but they only had one shot at this. The old warehouse district looked exactly like what you'd expect. Tall, rusty buildings with broken windows and faded signs from businesses long gone. Raj sat in an unmarked police car with Officer Mira, watching the afternoon sun cast long shadows between the buildings. They were parked far enough away to avoid detection, but close enough to see the black SUV from that morning, now parked outside one of the warehouses. "Remember," Officer Mira said quietly, adjusting her earpiece, "you're just here to identify voices. The moment anything seems off, we move in." Around them, hidden in various positions, were dozens of police officers, including Raj's brother Arun, all waiting for the right moment. The plan was clever in its simplicity. They'd let a controlled piece of information slip through Priya's phone. A message about a big delivery happening today. Now they were waiting to see who would show up to claim it. Movement at the east entrance, crackled a voice through the radio. Two men emerged from the warehouse, the same ones from the morning incident. They were talking on phones, looking nervous. Through the listening devices the police had set up, their conversation came through clearly. "She's not answering any calls," one said, pacing. "Something's wrong. We need to move everything tonight." "The boss won't like that," the other replied, wiping sweat from his forehead. "We haven't secured the new routes yet." Raj nodded at Officer Mira. These were definitely the voices from that morning. She pressed her radio button, whispering coordinates to the waiting teams. Suddenly, a sleek silver car pulled up to the warehouse. A well-dressed man stepped out, his expensive suit out of place in these surroundings. The two men immediately straightened up, their nervous energy turning to obvious fear. "That's him," Officer Mira breathed. "The one we've been waiting for. Head of the whole operation." She spoke quietly into her radio again. "All units hold position. Let's see who else shows up." The well-dressed man wasn't happy. Even from their distance, they could see him gesturing angrily, his voice coming through the listening devices. "You idiots. One simple job. Find nice people, take their cars, deliver the goods. How hard is that to mess up? But boss, one of them stammered, this morning's target. He was different. Somehow he knew. I don't want excuses. The boss cut him off. Do you realize what's at stake here? We have clients waiting. Important people. The kind of people who don't accept failure. Raj felt a chill despite the warm afternoon. The boss's words confirmed what the police had suspected. This wasn't just about stealing cars. This was about something much bigger. More cars started arriving, expensive ones with tinted windows. Men in business suits stepped out, looking nothing like the criminals Raj had expected to see. They looked like people you'd pass on the street without a second glance. Bankers, lawyers, businessmen. Perfect, Officer Mira whispered, her eyes bright with anticipation. The whole network is coming together, just like we hoped. Through the warehouse's broken windows, Raj could see people moving around inside, shifting crates and checking papers. The boss was giving orders, pointing at a map spread out on a makeshift table. All the evidence we need is in that warehouse, Officer Mira said, watching through binoculars. We just need them to. She never finished her sentence. One of the men from the morning suddenly pointed directly at their car. There, that car wasn't here before. Everything happened at once. The boss's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing as he spotted them. He reached inside his jacket, but before he could do anything, Officer Mira's voice rang out through her radio. All units move in. Now. Police cars seemed to materialize from every shadow, lights flashing. Officers in tactical gear appeared from behind buildings and dumpsters. The sound of sirens filled the air as backup units raced in from the surrounding streets. The boss's face showed a moment of pure shock before he turned to run. But where could he go? The police had every exit covered. Years of careful planning, of hiding behind ordinary people's kindness, all came crashing down in mere seconds. As Raj watched the operation unfold, he realized this was more than just about catching bad guys. This was about protecting something precious, people's natural instinct to help others. And somehow, his simple morning jog had helped make it happen. The next few hours felt like watching a movie in fast forward. The warehouse buzzed with activity as police officers cataloged evidence and led away suspects in handcuffs. The well-dressed boss, who turned out to be a prominent businessman named Mr. Kumar, sat in the back of a police car, his perfect suit now wrinkled and his confident smile gone. Inside the warehouse, each opened crate revealed another layer of the story. What looked like ordinary shipping boxes contained carefully hidden compartments. Officer Mira walked Raj through the scene, explaining how the operation had worked. They used stolen cars to move goods because nobody looks twice at normal vehicles on the road, she explained, pointing to a map on the wall covered in routes and dates. The cars they targeted weren't random. They chose people who looked trustworthy. Teachers, doctors, office workers. Cars that wouldn't raise suspicion. Raj's brother Arun appeared, holding up a stack of documents. You won't believe this, he said, shaking his head. They kept detailed records of everyone they scammed. Listen to these notes. Target drives a white sit-in, helps old ladies cross the street, likely to stop and help. His voice filled with disgust. They literally watched people and picked out the kind ones. The afternoon sun streamed through the warehouse's broken windows, illuminating swirling dust particles and creating long shadows between the shelves. Police photographers moved around, documenting everything. Each flash of their cameras revealed another piece of evidence. A young officer approached with a laptop. Sir, you need to see this, he said to the inspector. We found their entire operation manual. They called it the Kindness Protocol. It's a whole system for identifying and exploiting good people. Raj looked at the screen, feeling sick to his stomach. The document detailed different scenarios they used: sick grandmothers, lost pets, broken down cars, each designed to appeal to people's natural desire to help others. The worst part, Officer Mira said softly, is how many people will think twice before helping someone in need after experiencing something like this. They're not just stealing cars, they're stealing trust. Just then, a commotion broke out near the entrance. Two more officers led in a familiar face, the second man from the black SUV that morning. He'd been caught trying to sneak away through a back alley. His eyes widened when he saw Raj. "That's him," he blurted out. "The one who ruined everything this morning. If it wasn't for him." "If it wasn't for him," Officer Mira cut in sharply, "you would still be out there targeting innocent people. Take him away." As the sun began to set, casting orange light through the warehouse windows, the full scale of the operation became clear. The gang had been active in 5 different cities. They had detailed files on hundreds of potential targets, all people known in their communities for being helpful and kind. "You know what's interesting?" Arun said, standing beside Raj as they watched the evidence being packed up. "They thought they were clever, targeting kind people. But in the end, it was kindness that brought them down." Raj looked at him questioningly. "Think about it," Arun continued. "If you hadn't stopped to help someone you thought was in trouble, we would never have caught them. Being kind isn't a weakness, it's what makes us human." The inspector gathered everyone for a briefing. The numbers were staggering. Over 50 arrests, hundreds of recovered items, and connections to other criminal networks in different states. But more importantly, they had prevented countless other good people from becoming victims. As the day's excitement wound down, Raj sat in his brother's office again, finishing another cup of that terrible police station coffee. His phone had dozens of missed calls from work, but somehow that didn't seem important anymore. What mattered was that something good had come from this whole experience. Officer Mira walked in, holding a folder. "We're not quite done yet," she said, her expression serious but her eyes twinkling. "There's one more thing we need your help with. Something that could help prevent this from happening to others." A week had passed since the warehouse raid, but Raj found himself back at the police station, this time in a large conference room filled with reporters and police officials. Officer Mira had convinced him to share his story as part of a public awareness campaign. The room buzzed with anticipation as camera crews set up their equipment. "Just speak from the heart," Officer Mira advised, adjusting the microphone on the podium. "Your experience could help so many people." She handed him some water and gave an encouraging smile. Looking out at the sea of faces, Raj took a deep breath. His brother Arun gave him a thumbs up from the back of the room. The lights felt warm, and his collar seemed too tight, but he knew this was important. "A week ago," he began, his voice shaky at first but growing stronger, "I was just a regular guy going for my morning jog. I saw someone who seemed to need help, and I stopped. What happened next taught me something valuable about kindness, and about being smart with that kindness." The room fell silent as he shared his story. He talked about the park bench, the fake tears, the clever way the gang had played on people's emotions. But more importantly, he talked about what he'd learned. "They thought they were targeting weakness," he explained, "but kindness isn't weak. It's about being both compassionate and careful. It's okay to help others. We should help others. But we also need to be aware." Officer Mira stepped up next, unveiling a new police initiative called Smart Kindness. She explained how they were working with community groups to create safe ways for people to help others in need. Local businesses had agreed to serve as safe meeting points. A new app was being developed where people could verify requests for help. "What happened to Mr. Raj could have ended very differently," she said, gesturing to the presentation screen behind her. "But because he had taken some simple safety precautions, installing an emergency button, sharing his location with family, he not only protected himself, but helped us uncover a major criminal operation." The questions from reporters came quickly. How many people were affected by this gang? What happened to the stolen cars? How can people protect themselves? Each answer revealed more about how the gang had operated, but also about how communities could fight back. The police had set up a helpline for past victims who might have been too embarrassed to come forward before. During a break in the press conference, an elderly woman approached Raj. Her eyes were wet with tears. "I never reported it when it happened to me," she said quietly. "I felt so foolish for falling for their trick. But hearing your story, thank you for being brave enough to share it." More people started coming forward with similar stories. Each one had been carefully chosen because of their kindness. Each one had felt ashamed about being deceived. But now they were finding strength in sharing their experiences. Local business owners joined the initiative, offering their shops as safe spaces where people could verify requests for help. Community groups organized workshops on smart kindness, teaching people how to help others while staying safe. The real success story here, Arun said during his presentation, isn't just catching the bad guys. It's showing that we don't have to choose between being kind and being safe. We can be both. As the press conference wound down, Raj noticed something remarkable. People weren't just talking about the crime anymore. They were talking about solutions. Parents discussed teaching their children about safe ways to help others. Students shared ideas about creating buddy systems for people in need. Officer Mira ended the session with a powerful message. The criminals thought they could use kindness as a weapon against us. Instead, they taught us how to make kindness stronger. Later that evening, as Raj walked through the park, the same park where it all began, he saw a young woman helping an elderly man with his groceries. But now, there was something different. The woman was wearing a Safe Helper badge from the new community program, and they were standing in front of a designated safe meeting spot. Small changes, but important ones. The city was learning, adapting, but not letting fear win. And somehow, Raj's morning jog had helped make it happen. 1 month later, Raj stood at the entrance of City Hospital, holding a small bouquet of flowers. Not for a fake sick grandmother this time, but for something much more meaningful. The Smart Kindness program had led him to volunteer at the hospital's new community outreach center, where he helped coordinate safe assistance for people genuinely in need. "There you are," called out Nurse Deepa, who ran the center. "The new volunteers are waiting in the conference room." Her smile was warm and genuine, reminding Raj why he'd chosen to turn his experience into something positive. The conference room was filled with faces both eager and nervous. Young students, retired professionals, working people who wanted to make a difference, all here to learn how to help others safely. Raj placed his flowers in a vase and took his position at the front of the room. "A month ago, he began, I learned the hard way that wanting to help others can sometimes put us at risk. But today, I'm here to show you how we can turn that risk into something beautiful." He shared his story again, but this time with a different focus. Instead of dwelling on the crime, he talked about the amazing changes that had followed. The Safe Helper program had already assisted over 1,000 people in genuine need. Local businesses had created designated safe spaces where people could meet and verify help requests. Last week, he told them, an elderly man needed help getting to his actual sick wife in this very hospital. Instead of being afraid to ask, he used our new community app. Within minutes, a verified volunteer was there to help him. Officer Mira, who had become a good friend, stepped in to explain the safety protocols they'd developed. "We're not just preventing crimes," she said. "We're building a stronger community. Every safe interaction builds trust." During the break, Raj's brother Arun dropped by in his police uniform. "You won't believe this," he said, grinning. "Remember those detailed records the gang kept of kind people? We've turned that list into something amazing. Instead of targeting these people, we're inviting them to become community leaders." The afternoon session focused on practical training. Volunteers learned about the new safety app, the verification system, and the network of safe spaces throughout the city. But more importantly, they learned how to trust their instincts while staying protected. Being careful doesn't mean being cold. Raj explained to a young volunteer who worried about seeming unfriendly. It means being smart with your kindness. As the training wrapped up, an unexpected visitor arrived. It was the elderly woman from the press conference, the one who had been too ashamed to report her experience with the gang. But now she stood tall, wearing a senior safety advisor badge. "Because of what happened here," she told the group, her voice strong and clear, "I no longer feel like a victim. I'm a teacher now, helping other seniors learn about safe ways to give and receive help." The sun was setting as Raj packed up his materials, casting a warm glow through the hospital windows. His phone buzzed with a notification from the community app. Another successful Safe Help connection had been made across town. Looking around the room one last time, he saw Officer Mira helping a volunteer adjust their new safety badge. His brother was showing someone how to use the emergency alert system. Nurse Depot was arranging next week's schedule of community helpers. This wasn't just a response to crime anymore. It had become something much bigger, a movement of people refusing to let fear stop them from being kind. As Raj walked to his car, he passed the park where everything had started. A new sign stood there now, Safe Community Meeting Point. Below it, a mother was teaching her child about the importance of being both kind and careful. His morning jog route had changed since that day, not out of fear, but because he now stopped to check on the safe spaces along the way. Each one represented a small victory, proof that kindness, when protected and nurtured, grows stronger. The story that began with an attempt to exploit kindness had transformed into a lesson about making kindness smarter, safer, and more powerful than ever. And somehow, that felt like the perfect ending to a story that started with a simple morning run in the park.